All right, we're here for another episode of Florida Tennis Magazine YouTube. Is that what we're
Very
calling it?
cool.
We had a
Yeah,
name.
talking tennis, maybe
Oh,
Florida tennis. Talking tennis is probably there's probably a
yes.
million shows called talking tennis, but whatever we call
Yeah,
it,
probably.
it's
Yeah.
Florida tennis talking tennis, I guess. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just launching recently, just like Andy Roddick, more or less the same, you know.
we're at the same
But
level.
yeah,
Yeah,
same level. But yeah, we talked about Delray Beach Open, but we want to do deep dives onto individual players, and one that we're starting with is Ben Shelton.
yeah.
Just an interesting player, you know. He's outside the mold. There's a lot about him that's interesting. Um,
Oh wait,
look,
there we go. That's
that's
been
cool.
that's kind of not really showing very well.
That's
That's the
cool,
first
actually.
cover
Yeah.
we did. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're gonna dive into some details, some idiosyncrasies, some stats, but just starting with overview. What's your overview you want to say about him as we get it going?
Well, Ben Shelton, Zach and I were at the Miami Open. Or no, I was at the Miami Open. You were not at the Miami Open. This was last year.
Last year.
And I was watching Ben Shelton practice and was very impressed. It was in the practice courts. I was on the phone with Zach, and Zach was like, "This guy's got something different, some star power." And so both of us, I guess, kind of came to the same conclusion pretty quickly that this guy was going to be something special. So once I got to see him hit and play and researched him a bit more about his background at University of Florida and his father, who was a pro tennis player as well, Bryan Shelton. We decided for the first issue I was involved with Florida Tennis last year, which is our July-August issue, to put him on the cover. That issue happened to go to the U.S. Open with us, and we put it in the Players Lounge and put it all over the U.S. Open. And everyone was like, "What are you doing putting like 45 in the world on the cover of a magazine?" It made no sense. And then by the semifinals, everyone were like, "Wow, this is incredible. You got on the cover, you picked the next big star." And so I've been a huge fan of it for a long time. That's a little bit about my background with Ben, is just taking this big risk, rolling the dice. My very first cover of Florida Tennis that I was involved in, putting someone who was kind of a low-ranked player on the cover was a bit of a risk, but I thought there was something special about him and just kind of maybe luckily turned out to be right. And a lot of it I still think had to do with me and Zach talking about it way back when I was watching him practice at the Miami Open last year. So it's pretty crazy serendipity here. But yeah.
Yeah, well, what people don't know is that you have a DeLorean and that you went ahead in time and planned
Right.
out that meticulously. No, it was quite, I mean, you could say it was quite lucky, but you sensed it. And it's funny that you give me credit because my first impressions were this guy's got a huge booming serve.
Right.
He's not so predictable. Uh, he's got a huge forehand, and he's got like a self-confidence that's huge, but he's got a really bad backhand that people are just gonna target. And and I thought it was like he was gonna have more difficulty rising up. So I
Yeah.
was not expecting as much as I think you were. So I think you had the better expectations than I. Although you told me, I don't know what I said that made you think I was
I
convincing
remember you
you.
said you
Because
said that you said this guy's got star power. He's
well,
just
yeah, yeah,
special, something intangible.
yeah,
That the way he plays, the way he just
yeah,
conducts himself on the court, that swagger, that confidence. There's something very
yeah.
special about this guy, and he's going to go far.
Well,
And you're
yeah,
right.
that was the overview point I was about to I was thinking I would start with here
Yeah,
because when you get down to their core, a lot of tennis players seem to have an extreme self-confidence issue. They seem to have this extreme self-criticism issue, right? And
right.
they struggle like at big points, you know? Like it's
Yeah,
just the norm. It's not even something to oh who's great in big points. Like it's so few are great in big points. It's
yeah.
just routine. Oh, you're serving for the match. You're gonna very likely you mess up. Like serving you know,
You're
like
right.
there's just all of those pressure point in time. And Ben Shelton is he's got more of like what you get from a star basketball player,
Right.
like this kind of extreme self-confidence where this kind of thing that kicks in is like, oh, it's a big moment. I'm ready for it. I'm rising for it. Like
Right. It's like
not a fear of
overtime.
it,
He
but
wants the
like an
ball. Yeah.
enthusiasm for it. Like that's what you
Yeah.
live for. Like when you play basketball as a kid, you're trying to hit that buzzer beater, that game-winning shot.
Right.
And
Right.
so many players like carry that with them. And there are certain like Alcaraz has that a bit, when it's a big
Yeah.
moment, he's such an enthusiast, he's such a fan that he's like this is what he dreamt of.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's how tennis players are raised, how they're trained, how everything is criticized for like a million times, or just they get so that the enthusiasm like worn out of them by the grind of tennis training. I saw a discussion from Gil Gross on YouTube this week where someone's asking, is tennis the most difficult sport? Not the hardest, like, fighting MMA or something, but like the most difficult. And one of the things that came to mind for me is just like the hours you have to put in to be a top 100 player or a pro in tennis. The
Yeah.
hours you have to put in are truly insane compared to others. Like, I mean, I know you have to put in a ton of hours in basketball and soccer and everything, but tennis is like you have to another level. And I
Yeah.
think at some point that just grinds the fandom out of a lot of players. And Sinner, Alcaraz, they're different. They love that. They love
The
they're
grind.
big fans.
Yeah.
And Shelton, I don't know if he's such a big fan, but that's just it's in his personality. Like, oh, the big moment, that's what I live for. And yeah, I think it makes him overperform in slams, overperform in big matches.
Right.
He just carries it. It sort of drives me nuts sometimes, the amount he has of it. Like I get irritated by it, but at the same time you can see how much it does for him on the court.
He likes the big stage, right? I mean, you see him in, the two big tournaments, I guess, obviously he had that was a Japan Open, or was it not Japan? Where did he win? It was somewhere in the Asian swing. He won a
Yeah.
tournament this
Might
year.
have been
Shanghai,
Japan.
maybe. I can't
I think it
remember.
was Japan. I
Think it
think it
was
was
Japan.
Japan. Yeah.
But regardless, the big ones for him originally were Australian Open, then US Open. So
Yeah.
he likes a big stage, right? He likes to make sure that he makes himself heard by his game on a big stage, like at the US Open or the Australian Open. So it's
Well,
exciting to
it's funny because he had the breakout in the Australian Open, and then between
probably
that
call.
and the US Open, he apparently didn't win two matches in a row.
No, it was
He did
crazy.
horribly.
Yep.
And then the US Open comes along and he gets to the semifinals. So it's like, yeah. I mean, so
Yes.
well, let's
There's so much. So here's the crazy thing. So Zach prepared a lot of really interesting
yeah, we could.
statistics for this call, but there's so much. So there's so we can even go back and forth. There's a lot of quantitative stuff we can look at when we analyze Ben Shelton, and there's qualitative, kind of analysis we can do. And one of the things that Zach's talking about here is just like, if there's something about his game that's both immature and extremely exciting at the same time, right? So he just doesn't
Yeah.
seem like he's a seasoned tennis player yet. He's not composed on the court. He doesn't play the percentages. We have this saying, my
Yeah.
my doubles partner and I, again, we're kind of playing senior tennis, but he played some pro tennis, my doubles partner from UConn. And we always say PTP, play the percentages, right?
Yeah.
That's
That's
exactly what Ben Shelton does not do. He
yeah,
does not
exactly.
want to play the percentages. He doesn't want to play percentage tennis. He wants to go for big shots in really unusual situations, which can be seen as a more seasoned player as being almost a bit immature. But he makes them, and especially when it's a big point. I mean, and
Yeah,
so you gotta love that swagger. I mean, you got to.
I mean the game has become so much a game of play the percentages. And I heard someone saying recently like when you play with Djokovic, like the guy, I forget who it was, but again, I think this came from Gil Gross video again, but he was saying that this player said once you play with Djokovic on the practice court, like training with him, you realize he's just all the time playing the percentages, like all
Yeah,
the time. Like he just does not break from playing the high percentage shot and well, of course.
yeah,
And it's him, Sinner, it goes throughout the top 100, whatever. That's what they're really good at, and some better than others, of course. But they're all trained that way so much now, and yeah, it's a strength and a weakness for Ben because sometimes he just plays the low percentage shot and misses, Other
Right.
times he plays the unexpected low percentage shot and
Yes.
makes it, and the other guy is like thrown off because I don't know to what extent they know what's coming based on what is the smart shot. Like I don't know
Yeah.
how much players are like already leaning towards a certain shot because they know that's the shot the other guy should play. Like it's intuitive, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
but but Ben throws that off so much. He's so
I
much
know.
going against the grain that I think it's very hard for players to like figure out what they should be doing?
So such a great point, Zach, because at the end of the day, I always tell people that really good tennis players are very good at pattern recognition, right? They just see patterns quickly and they're able to get a jump on the ball and look like they have great footwork when often they aren't necessarily that fast on court, but they have great pattern recognition that gives them a first step, like Allen Iverson against Michael Jordan, like that kind of. You're like, how did he just break the ankles of Michael Jordan on a jump shot? So it's like, so in any event, that's the key here. Pattern recognition is so key to tennis. But with Ben Shelton, you don't know what he's going to do. You're
Yeah,
completely lost trying to figure out what shot he's going to go for. He doesn't give you any patterns. He's completely extemporaneous and versatile and creative with his game, which is
yeah,
ultra refreshing, by the way, because nowadays there's so many big tennis fans that miss the days of McEnroe and a
yeah,
lot of the earlier players, Nastasi, who were so creative on court, right? You don't really see that much anymore. Of course, Federer was, and that was one of the reasons why I was so drawn to Federer. But Djokovic is the exact opposite to that. Is a percentage tennis player,
yeah,
as is Sinner, as is Alcaraz, maybe less so because he's a little bit more gifted with touch and with drop shots and angles, and he's a bit more creative. But in any event, Shelton, it's a question: is he creative or is he just making
no.
it up as he goes? Is he
I'm
just
I mean
really
he just
imposing?
doesn't seem to have these patterns drilled into him. Like
No,
he didn't come through the youth in the same way. His dad obviously was a former pro, was his coach in college, so his dad knows this kind of thing, but I don't know I'm very curious. You have to interview him sometime and find out more like if his dad consciously didn't teach him in the same way so that he wouldn't have these pattern, or if it was just a case of like he was so busy with football and other and basketball,
right?
other stuff that he just didn't have the time. I'm curious, but yeah, so we're gonna dive into stats for different players, and the fascinating thing in the stats is how it pulls out the personality
Yeah,
of a player too. And so we'll go through these. So yeah, let's start with the serves. This is obviously his one of his big weapons that makes
yeah,
him a potential Grand Slam champion. He's got a huge booming hard serve. Um, but I saw this chart recently. I don't know if I shared it with you yet, but like the top 20 players, how well they serve and how powerful and how accurate.
yeah.
And so Ben Shelton is very high up in power, but very low in accuracy. And this
Interesting.
score comes through in his stats. By far, the number one most powerful and most accurate by far was Hurkacz.
Yeah. Well,
Djokovic was second for accuracy. Zverev was second for power, but Shelton was up there for power, but way down there for accuracy. So he's surprised. I think sort of surprisingly because people know how hard he serves. He served a little more aces and unreturned serves than the tour average, but not dramatically so. So
what's the numbers look
he had
like?
14% first serve aces versus tour average of 12%.
Okay.
Second serve aces, he was 4% versus tour average of 1%. And that
Okay.
goes we're already going to his personality.
Right.
Already he's more inclined to hit a big second serve than your
Right.
average pro tennis player.
Right.
And it just shows right off the bat, like that's who he is. He's going to go for the surprising big shot more
Yeah.
than the high percentage safe shot. And as you
Yeah.
already see it in his second serve aces being 3 percentage points higher, even more than his first serve ace. So it's funny, yeah.
And let's talk about the interesting numbers, lot to unpack there. But the big thing here is, obviously the guy was really was dreaming of being a quarterback in the NFL, right? So he's got a
Yeah.
great throwing motion, and you can see that in his serve. He's got a live arm, they call it, where he's just really got good snap. But what's real so interesting about Shelton is that he's got that pinpoint, where he kind of moves his foot in when he serves, which is a classic motion that I think generates a lot of power compared to platform servers, which are more like a Djokovic or a Federer that have that platform where you hold the 2 feet kind of just aligned like this essentially, as opposed to moving a foot in. Um, but I think there's so much action on his serve. Not only can he serve really fast, but when he wants to kick the ball, it's
Mhm.
literally going almost so high that
Yeah.
the people try to return it can almost not even reach it. It goes
I
so high.
I
His
noticed that in
kick
his
is
last match against.
unbelievable.
I
Yeah.
know. I saw that against Rude. I was like, holy cow, he goes for the moon on his kicks.
Yeah. Yeah. Massive spin, massive action on his serve. And he's also smart. Now he can't pick his spots, what we call it, and the common refrain is, can he pick his spots? Does he hit his spots? Not so well, according to these numbers. But on the flip side, I like the versatility in his serve. His can opener, his slice serve out wide is beautiful. He will take pace off. He knows to rest his arm if to keep, to keep up for a five setter, let's say in the Grand Slams. But regardless, yeah, he's a risk taker on his serve,
Yeah.
but it's a great serve. It's it's
Yeah.
it's world class. Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, when you think about his potential, again, that's the thing. Like, he's going to get better at hitting his spots, and then he's
right,
going to be really scary on his serve. But yeah, there's a couple more things on his serve that just go to his personality. So one, again, his first serve unreturnable but not aces, 5% versus 2% tour average. But it's again his second serve unreturnable, tour average 0%,
right.
him 3%.
There
So
you
it's
go.
just again like a big pressure moment, he's going to go for more. He's going to be bold, and that's who
Yep.
he is, and that makes a difference for him. And then also, he serves into the body more. So on first serve, 17% into the body versus 12% tour average. Second serve, 44%, 36%. Again, this just speaks to his personality to me. He wants to take it to the guy. He
Yeah.
makes it personal. He's like he wants it to be this, I'm gonna take it to you, you know? And it's like that's his personality on the court with his talk. It irritates some people, it irritates me. But it's
Yeah.
like it's not like I'm gonna try to do a slide. No, he's like, okay, I'm gonna go at him. And it's
Yeah,
like
he
that's just
does.
part of how he plays.
I think the equivalent of trash talk. I mean, you got guys like
Yeah.
Terry kind of really do trash talk, and Medvedev that play a lot of mind games, and they're. But I think in the case of Shelton, he's a bully on court. Like he will
Yeah,
serve right into your body as hard as he can. I remember against Tom
exactly.
Paul at the US Open, he served, I think, 147 directly into his body. He almost knocked him over. It was so big. So that's very intimidating, and I think he does it purposely.
Yeah.
So he'll go at you, man. He's not afraid to, especially if you step in too close. I think he wants to let you know, hey, man, don't do that
Yeah.
again. You know.
Yeah.
And the other thing I just want to add one more thing is
Yeah.
it was interesting what you were saying about the second serve is that he's not afraid to double fault. He double faults. His
Mhm.
body language is like whatever. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, I'm just going for a big
True.
second serve. I love the way, to some degree, with Ben Shelton when he misses a big shot, either a second serve and double faults, or misses a passing shot that he should have probably lobbed or something, safer. He just has this like whatever, man. I'm so good that it doesn't really matter. I'm just going for my shots. You know what I mean? Like, and I just
No,
love that confidence. And to
that's a
your
great
point,
point.
once he starts to dial in a lot of this stuff, his upside is enormous in my
No,
opinion.
I it's a great point. I completely agree. I can picture it too. I think it annoys me. Like I don't like it. It's too much. But at the same time, I'm like it brings a higher level of entertainment to any match.
Yeah,
And also you can just see like that is the sauce of champions. Like that is what's gonna make him
right.
instead of shrinking and getting scared to do it, he just like, it's all right, I'll do it next time. I'm gonna win this anyway. It's like he's just
Hey,
this extreme
bravado.
confidence like that
Yeah.
almost nobody has. So it's like, I don't know. And yeah, it doesn't look like it goes away. And it's like,
No,
I mean, I don't know, but at the end of the day, as he gets better, that will win him big matches.
I
So,
agree. I agree.
I don't
I think at the end of the day, for him, the upside is so huge. And I go back to that match where he lost at the US Open against Djokovic, and it was like I think Djokovic really tried to stick it to him at the end of the match with that whole with the
yeah,
phone
no,
thing, and kind of little trash talking. And I think, but that's what makes
yeah,
it's like Djokovic, Medvedev, and throw Shelton in there too. They take it personal. They
Yeah.
like to get into that kind of like headspace where you're really trying to get into the real estate of someone else's mind. And even Kyrgios, as much as you may like or dislike Kyrgios, he was able to
Yeah.
do that. That guy
Yeah.
lived Wimbledon, like, and he has big wins over all the goats. So
Oh yeah,
uh,
and he talked as a commentator on Tennis Channel. He talked about doing this, yeah, strategically to try to
yeah,
win a match. Like, and I love that because, and he's a huge basketball fan, so I love the trash talking basketball. I don't always like how some people carry it
that's
onto the tennis court, but I like the idea of doing it. I don't, but yeah, to go through a few more stats, that sort of talk about what we talked about earlier. So going down, he goes down the line more than average, 16% of the time versus 12% tour average. It's
right.
14 and 11 on 14 versus 11% on forehand, 16 versus 13% on backhand. So it doesn't matter which, 25% on backhand slice versus 14% tour average going down the line backhand slice.
Yep.
So again, these are like it's not advisable to go down the line on a backhand slice. There's
Right,
a lower,
right.
the higher part of the net, harder shot to make, less upside. But you see how he does it, potentially not realizing
Well, there's a few
he
things here. We
shouldn't.
we talked about this a little bit. There's an interesting dynamic with a lefty, right? If a lefty's playing a
Oh,
righty,
that's true.
then they're going to go down the line, or they should be going down the line a little bit more often. So you're going to probably see his stat a little bit
That's
higher
true.
for a lefty. So that's one thing. But there's a very important point that Zach's making here, which is critical. And that is if you're playing percentage tennis, you should, it's why you see sort of boring rallies oftentimes just going cross court. And that's because the net's lower there, right? So you got a little bit more lift with a little bit more topspin. You're clearing the net by much more. You're just safer going cross court, and that's what people drill in academies and clinics with pros, teaching pros growing up is cross court, right? Down the line tennis is risky tennis. It's just difficult. You're turning your body usually into a shot, and you want to go cross court. It's not as natural to go down the line. And something I think Ben does very well is that down the line shot.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, I think there's two things. I mean, he's more willing, or you might even say more eager to do high risk shots. And
yeah,
I mean, I think it's like a Shapovalov. I have this tendency, and it's horrible on a tennis court. I want to make the riskier higher.
right.
It's a stupid way to play tennis, but it's just like you're drawn to it or you're not. And he's drawn to it. But also, I think it also highlights he's not comfortable in a backhand to backhand route or backhand to forehand rally, as often would be the case. He doesn't want to be trading on the backhand. So he's also going to go down the line more even if with this backhand slice, just to get out of that, get
Right. To
not be
get,
trapped in the corner on his backhand where he's likely to be the first to make an error.
yep. Yep. Agreed. Agreed. I mean, look, I I think he's figuring his game out. I really do. And I may be wrong here, but I think he started playing at 14 or something, he like seriously playing at 14. And that's insane for a pro tennis player. I mean, most tennis pros, guys that play professional tennis, they start when they're 6,
Yeah.
or younger. I
Yeah.
mean, he started in his teens. Maybe it was 11 or 12, but regardless, if you're starting over 10 years old, you're done. You're
Yeah.
never going pro. But just in terms of like the number
And
of
do you
balls,
have any insight on like when you say started at 14, like how many hours he was putting in? Like that's what I'm not really clear on. Because I mean, I know like a normal player going pro, they're like spending like 5 hours from the age of
yeah.
like 10.
Yeah,
Like,
so generally speaking, like when I went to an academy, so there's like the Macy Academy, the Everett Academy, the Sanchez Academy. I went to Saddlebrook, which is Harry Hopman Tennis Academy, Bolletary, which is now IMG. Generally speaking, most big academies in the US and even Mouratoglou out in Europe and all the European academies, especially in Spain, Piatti and Italy, most of them are 5 hours a day of tennis. You're just playing 5 hours a day. And that's what you're going back to what you were talking about before. Still a lot of tennis balls you're hitting as a junior player. And to think about Ben Shelton, and he's somewhere in his teens, we got to get the accurate information here. I'm sure, um, at the end of the day, it's like he just hasn't hit that many tennis balls yet,
yeah.
compared to most pros. And I don't think he was an academy kid. I don't think he
Yeah.
played. Gotta
but like
be.
even when he started taking it seriously at 14, 15 or whatever it was, do you think at that point he started doing 5 hours a day on the
Probably
court?
not.
Probably not until like college or something, right? I mean, we don't really know, but I just get the impression like he never did that before college.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, there's a really great article on ESPN that I was really impressed with about Ben Shelton that just talked about how when he was playing number 5 on the team at University of Florida, um, he lost a big match. His dad, Bryan Shelton, that was the Florida Gators coach, sat down with Ben and said, "Look, man, I got options here. Like, if you can't step up, I can't keep you in the singles lineup." He would wind up being a doubles player, which just horrified Ben. And he immediately like told his dad, "There's no way I'm letting my team down again. Don't worry, I'll get after it. And I'm gonna get, I'm gonna start to accelerate my progress and my game." And then that year he wound up winning the NCAA title. So it's just so interesting how, he's just still fairly new to this game compared to a lot of these, superstars who are in the top 100.
And I'm
Uh,
tempted to say like more people
players.
should rise up like that, but at the same time, he's got an arm and an athleticism
Yeah,
that's special. I mean, you like that's why he's able to. Well, I want to go through a little more stats, and I'm
sure.
curious on the next one. He goes down the middle more than average, 34% versus 27%. Similar backhand even more, 44% versus 31%. Um, what does that tell? Like, what does that mean to you? Because I don't really know what to take from that, except maybe it's what you were talking about before, being a lefty. I don't know. I'm curious if that means anything to you, because I'm not sure what.
It's a harder serve. It
Well, not
oftentimes,
serving,
yeah.
just in rally
Oh,
in
you mean
ground
just in routes.
strokes.
Okay,
He
just
just
remember.
more. He goes down the middle more instead of opening up, going left or
Opening
right,
up
opening up the
angles or
court.
yeah. I mean, it could mean a lot of things. I mean, it
And that's
is
forehands and backhands,
forehands
just
and
across
backhand.
the board.
It could be that his dad, Bryan Shelton, who played pro tennis, and I think he was top 50. Um, I think his dad who's now coaching him, left the University of Florida and just said, "Look, I'm done being a college coach. I'm going to go on tour with Ben." Basically told Ben, "Hey, look, man, if you're going to win big matches, you're just a little too wild out there. Just go down the middle." When things get difficult, I mean, I do this too, and most players, but not pro players in the top 50. This is the thing. It's like
That's
you're able to usually move the ball around a bit more. But again, if he's young and he's still feeling his game out, the safe move is put more topspin on the ball, put more shape on the ball, and go down the middle. And so that may be something where his father is coaching him to try to get some more consistency out of his ground strokes.
that's
That's
why
really my guess. Yeah.
That's why you get paid the big bucks, Matt. That's a great answer, I think. This sounds good. So yeah, that's interesting. Well, so another one that sort of I would say caught me off guard. Like to me, he has really good touch. I think he's got really good touch.
Me too.
He does great. He has just great hands sometimes. You're like, wow, what a shot. But statistically, he's quite poor. Like
Okay.
he won 66% of points he played at a net shot versus a tour average of 72%. So 6 percentage points below tour average. And 30% of points where he played a drop shot, he won the point versus tour average of 55%.
Interesting.
So he's actually very poor in that regard. He does better with lobs, won 34% of points where he lobbed versus tour average of 30%. My thought is one, he might be more, I don't, maybe not more prone. My thought is that he just doesn't have the refinement. He doesn't have the time on court. He hasn't done it as much, and maybe he doesn't do it at the right time. He's inexperienced with when he should come to net, when he should pull a drop shot, and so he throws them out there sometimes when he shouldn't, and he's not really prepared to do it well. That's my only thought, and that's again a thing that like with time and experience, he should get much better because I think he's got great hands.
I
So
think
again,
he
you have to expect that he will get much better at these things, and then he's just going to get much more dangerous, right? But
My takeaway on that would be that he appears to be impatient, right? And that's a
yes, yeah, that's
very, very challenging trait for a lot of tennis players is when you get impatient, you
yeah.
either attack the net to try to finish the point quickly, or you just go for, a sick drop shot and see if you can win the point, or at least really, win the point within, two or three more balls after that. Um, so when you get impatient and you don't want to really grind it out like this, in a ground stroke sort of beat down with somebody, you'll attack the net, or you'll try to bring somebody in with a great drop shot. And if you do it too much, you're gonna miss, right? And that impatience is gonna lead you to become inconsistent and gonna lead to a lot of errors, unforced errors often. And so I see that with this game. I think he needs to just think about point construction a bit more. I mean, the whole thing, it's not just become more comfortable in your game so that
Mhm.
you're able to play longer ground stroke rallies with an opponent. It's actually really thinking about point construction. Really let me think about how to construct a point, take my time, and get myself into a position where I can win the point the way I want to win the point, not force the point, which is often what happens when you get impatient. So that would be my takeaway on why those stats are the way they are.
That's a great It's funny because the next group of stats is that he loses longer rallies more than the
Yeah,
store average, which we're not going to go into the numbers on it, but he's a little worse in longer rallies, and that just
right.
plays right into what you're saying, that he gets impatient, he doesn't know what to do at some point when it gets longer. So that's great. So you basically, yeah,
You look at a
attacking.
guy like Medvedev or Djokovic, right? They will they'll have a 50 ball rally, and they'll be comfortable, playing the point as long as it's needed, and
Yeah.
almost in a way to kind of put it in their opponent's face of like, look, I'll just rip the ball with you as long as you want, and I'm still going to win the point. They're not forcing anything. Where a guy like Dimitrov, for instance, who's a razzle dazzle player, which we love, just like Federer. And Federer was like this too. Will at a certain point say, okay, I'm done rallying. I want to force something to happen. They're gonna chip and come in, or I'm gonna drop, or I'm gonna hit a big angle. I'm gonna start to get a little bit out of the percentages to make sure that I can begin to work towards constructing the point so that I can close it. Whereas I think Medvedev and Djokovic aren't like that. So bring it back to Shelton. I think he just doesn't like to construct the point properly. And this is again the thing of
Yeah.
like, he's just learning, I think, how to construct points,
He's like a 12-year-old out there.
I don't, because I
No,
mean, my God, the
no,
guy's
no.
so
But you
talented,
think of a
so good,
12-year-old
but
who's like on the path to becoming a pro.
right.
And this is one of the things they have to learn, right?
Let me back up a little bit because I don't want to sound too critical,
No.
because at the end of the day, it's not. I think if he's playing a player outside the top 100, he looks much more composed. I think he's just, I think his game gets exposed a bit when he's playing top 50 players because they just have a little bit more time on court, and they've gone through the sort of junior ranks and the training a bit where they kind of understand the game in a different way. Now that
Well,
doesn't mean, again, that he's going to lose, because look what he does. He surprises people. And
yeah.
that's to be able to dictate points and to force points and be good at it, which is what Federer did so well and Dimitrov does so well sometimes, because they push the point, and that's an intimidation factor if you're good at it, that can make people really uncomfortable, get them on their heels, and you're able to win points quickly. And that's what Federer was so great at. Dimitrov, in this
Mhm.
recent resurgence, has been good at, and Shelton, when he's on, is good at.
Yeah.
But when he's off, he's wild with his game. So yeah.
Well, I'm a big Djokovic and Medvedev fan, and sometimes
Me
when they're
too.
doing that, I'm just like, there. It gets to a point where I'm like, just stop, because it looks like they're gonna collapse. Like you can see they're running out of like their legs are dying, but they're still continuing it. It's like this. It's like a kind of staring
Tenacity.
contest or something. But it's like
Yeah.
you will break before I break, kind of.
Right.
And it's like to some point you're like, this 1 point's not worth it. Don't kill yourself, but that's who they are. That's what they do. Yeah, it's interesting. And then, yeah, the player that Shelton just lost to this tournament was Rude. And you see, Rude is one of those guys. He's gonna play the percentages. He's gonna play the patterns, and he's like the complete foil to Ben Shelton in so many ways.
Right. Right.
So it was interesting. I was like, well, who's gonna come out on top in this? Like, the more unpredictable hotshot Ben Shelton, or the, you know, academy kid Rude, who's like just playing like a robot in some ways.
Right. Right. And then, we were talking about robo strokes last episode of like, is it robo strokes you see out there and you're like, okay, wait, this is just so standard, let's say, whereas Shelton's the opposite of robo strokes. Shelton's game literally comes from his spirit. You could just see it. It's like I mean, he has nice strokes, but at the end of the day, he's very intuitive on how he hits. It's
Yeah.
like it's very natural. He's so athletic. He's just got a great game, moves well. And so I think looking at these two guys, you got Rude and you got Shelton, both have parents that were pro players, if I'm not incorrect, right? So it's
Yeah,
like
right.
interesting. And yet, even
They're
both of
so
them have,
different.
yeah, how different they are. Isn't it wild that you think of a guy like,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, it's just look
Well,
thinking about it. It's just wild to see the difference between these two guys,
yeah.
We're both pro parents.
Well, it's funny. I don't want to pick on. I love Felix Auger Aliassime,
Yeah.
but he's one of these players. He's got a similar kind of athleticism, and but he's a player like he just never seems to know what to do outside of the script. Like
Yeah.
his instinct, his natural intuition on a shot just seems to be a big weakness of his. So it's very different from Shelton, where he just seems to have that instinct, that kind of that Allen Iverson, how to break your ankles kind of instinct, intuition. Like you can't teach. Like you just have to have that sense of when you go for this shot, when you go for that shot. Alcaraz has it, and
He
Shelton
does.
seems to have
He
that kind of
does.
thing. So the last thing, I should say all these stats come from Tennis Abstract, great site. This last one, I don't have the actual percentages because there's a bunch of different things, but the last point is that he's better than average on key points. So break points, game points, break point opportunities, return points on deuce, what they call key points, he's better than average. And I mean, that's just what we've been talking about the whole time. His instinct, his confidence, and to me, this is why I think he's going to win slams at some point. Why I think he's got so much potential, because when it comes down to it and it's a head-to-head battle, he's likely to do better
Yeah.
on a key point, on a pressure point. And he's got the confidence and the instinct to win. And there's so many matches where he wins them because of that. Or he
Yeah.
wins the set because of that, even against Ruud, like he won the first set. But yeah,
I, I think so first of all, great stats. I'll definitely check out that site. I think that's and really interesting way to look at a guy like Ben Shelton. We talked a lot about the swagger and the confidence. I think the big thing that we want to probably leave viewers with is that Ben Shelton may look wild out there and he may look unrestrained with his game a bit at this stage of his career and how he's progressing. But he has artistry. He really does.
yeah.
He's very creative on court. And that artistry is what draws us to this game at the end of the day. Guys like Federer, McEnroe back in the day, Kyrgios, Alcaraz, as much as he can be machine-like and robotic sometimes, he will bring artistry into his game and at the most unusual times too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's really what makes a player fun to watch. And we'll go back to we were just talking about basketball, so it's interesting. It's like playground ball, right? If you just grow up playing, at West Fourth Street or Rucker Park or whatever, you're a playground player. You can shake people. There's a way that you play NBA basketball that doesn't look like traditional
Yes.
basketball. The same thing I think with tennis, that there are certain guys out there that go from juniors to pro and they maintain this artistry on court that's so fun to watch.
Mhm.
And I think Ben Shelton has that intangible, this incredible artistry on court. Although sometimes it looks kind of wild. If he can dial it in, it's going to be something really special. Be it, the next 12 to 24 months. There's going to be some big things coming from this kid. So I'm excited to watch him.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's perfectly said. And yeah, how much he's improved. Like his backhand concerned me a lot after the Australian Open 2023, and I'm honestly a bit shocked how much has improved in that time. but it
Yeah,
just shows how raw he was, how much he's able. Like a lot of players, once they're at this level, it's very hard to improve on something because they've worked on it a lot and they just can't get better on it. He's got a lot of room to improve in in his weaknesses because he actually hasn't worked a lot on them already. He hasn't gotten to like his peak with them. He's maybe spent very little time on some of these things. So, but at the same time, he's got more, obviously, more practice and refinement than we probably given him credit today. Like, I mean, he's clearly hit enough tennis balls that he can do everything quite well, you know? It's
yeah,
like, I mean, he can make these amazing shots all, but yeah, I agree. There's a kind of the way I think about it sometimes is you have to like learn the patterns and just drill them into your head to get to a level. But then to get above that level, you have to be able to break them, right? And it's
right,
like a lot of players, they can get up to the level by being so obsessive and so dedicated, so disciplined, learning this stuff, but then they don't know how to break out of it after that. And it's like, and then some people just they have the instinct. And I mean, Nadal and Djokovic, they play pattern. They're very smart in how they play, but they just know the moment to break the pattern,
right, right,
surprise, especially
right.
playing each other. It's but there's just a lot of players they don't have quite that instinct, and I think Ben has it in spades. Like I think Ben and Alcaraz have it to me more than any of the other top players I can think of right now. Like that are coming up. Like
I
there's a
agree.
lot of really impressive top players coming up, but they have that you said that artistry, that creativity that's really special.
Really fun to watch. And so, I mean, one thing I would say is that as we, proceed into 2024 and get a chance to watch some of these guys, definitely try to tune into Ben Shelton. We like him. He's a Florida Gator.
Yeah.
Uh, and he's just doing some cool stuff. So, and the first cover I've been involved with Florida tennis was Ben Shelton. So we're excited to see where he goes.
Yeah, and I love there's a lot of Florida tennis players because they moved here. He was
Right.
raised here. He's a real Florida boy.
No, it's interesting. He was in Atlanta for a while and
Oh,
then
okay.
came to Florida and and then the thing is, but he's a Gator through and through,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, he
Like
is.
when he during off season, he'll go and hang out with his crew at the dorms,
That's cool.
at the University of Florida. He's just a through and through Gator, goes to Gator football games and friends of Gator track stars. That's who he kind of referenced his crazy, phone it in thing at the US Open. So he's a real Gator, he's a real Florida guy.
Well,
And
I know
so yeah,
you already had a great closing segment that I messed up, but you also talked to his dad, right?
I did. So I
So can
talked to
you,
dad.
yeah,
Yeah,
to end with what
yeah,
you,
yeah, a little
yeah,
personal story. So there's a few interesting things. So I was in the players lounge at the US Open, covering the tournament and went up there and saw his dad. And so I went up to his father, Bryan Shelton, and just told him I was a fan of his. I obviously knew of him when I was watching pro tennis as a younger guy and told him I was really impressed. This is early in the tournament. This is like probably the first round and told him I was going to go watch Ben. Ben was on some outer court where there wasn't, it was packed, but it was a tiny outer court. So it was not they weren't yet understanding the gravity of who he was. And I told him, I said, listen, man, I think your son's got enormous potential. And he's like, hey, man, we saw the cover and Ben freaked out. He loved it. And,
ugh,
we all felt so good. It just gave him an extra kind of boost of confidence. So I'm going to take full credit for his
yeah,
US Open run because of that cover.
you're
It's all my fault, right? Exactly. It's all our fault at Florida tennis. We'll make that claim, even though we can't back it up. But it was still cool hearing Bryan Shelton say that his son was thrilled to see his face on the cover. So
that makes, I mean, honestly, that kind of thing makes a difference. But it's great, yeah, and yeah, I think you also mentioned that Bryan Shelton just seemed like a really down to earth, like
yeah,
I forget what you said about him to me, but it was
yeah, he just seemed really grounded, and I think in a weird way, he's kind of very different than Ben, right? So
yeah,
so Ryan just seems like, really calm, really collected, really composed, really thoughtful about his game, about the way he thinks about tennis. Whereas his son is just like a firecracker out there, right? He's just wild, talent that is almost unrestrained.
Yeah.
And so I think so our conversation, we got a little into the weeds on stuff, probably would bore people here, but like it was just interesting because I was just like, yeah, I just think his game is so creative and so and you can see Brian just thinking like, yeah, he wants to dial it in. And I think that's part of what we talk about when he hits the ball up the middle a lot, is I think that's part of Brian's approach, is to try to get his son to create a little bit more in terms of constructing the point, right? Just not going for so much so quickly and not being impatient out there. And I think that's part of being a pro tennis player. You have to learn to be patient on court.
Yeah, well, fun stuff. I don't know who we're going to talk about next, but I thought it was a really fun first player deep dive. Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah, we'll see how he does in Miami soon and Indian Wells. Yeah. All right.
Exactly.
Thanks, Matt. Cheers.
Cool. Thank you, Zach. Okay, take care, man.